Thank you. I greatly appreciate that.
All right. Hopefully I'm YouTube famous. No, I'm just kidding. On your account. I'm just kidding.
I'm not even YouTube
I know.
famous.
I know, but I can dream being a YouTuber. No, just kidding. No, that's like such a common thing. Which now I found out that that's like the, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the DDP Academy.
That's the digital
Yeah,
academy.
so they learn all about like entertainment and media, which
Yeah,
I thought was so cool.
yeah.
Cause so I know personally my niece is always saying she wants to be a YouTuber. And
Yeah, my daughter has an Instagram account where she puts all her art stuff. And um I don't know, like my son's always like, I want to be a YouTuber. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, unless you're like a lot older, then yeah, okay. But like it, I mean, people make money. Look
yeah,
at, I don't know if you saw Ryan's toy review. He's the one that makes the most amount of money on YouTube, and it's a 8-year-old kid now, and he makes multi-million dollars. I mean, it's insane. And
yeah,
all this kid does is just like play with toys.
yeah.
And,
I
now
mean,
he has his own TV show and his clothing line and toy line and all
oh,
this
that is
craziness.
great. I mean, I'm guilty
So,
of following some YouTubers. Like I watch their channels, their
oh,
videos.
yeah.
So like, and I'm like, they make money doing this. And I just think it's pretty cool that the DDP is the academy teaches students how to handle media and entertainment that way. Pretty
Yeah.
cool.
And if you guys were looking, like if you're into stuff like that, they still have like all the academies still have openings. If you haven't like signed up for an academy, you guys can always do that. I think you just have to go to the district web, to their high school, the CV website, and then you should be able to see like the applications and stuff for that.
They have way more academies now than when I was in school. They only had the hospitality academy. I don't know if they still have that.
Yeah, they do.
Oh, okay. But I'm like, man, this is so cool, like for these students that attend school nowadays. So
Yeah.
I'm learning about you guys. I read it because somebody told me and they're all about me. So that was fun reading about it. Okay. So today is Monday, March 22. There's two things that we're going to be looking at today when we're in class. We're going to be completing some pages in your week 3 notebook, and it's still the topic of slope. Now, in this notes, there's going to be some drag, some click and drag pieces, and then there's going to be a lot of parts where we type or draw. So if you are looking for pieces, don't expect for all of the pieces to be down at the bottom. In some of these cases, we're going to have to type or draw. So after we complete our notes, we're going to be looking at our homework. Just to give you an example of how it should be completed, it's another pixel art assignment. So it's where if you type in your answer correctly, it should start coloring some of those pixels, and then you get an overall drawing there. So we want to make sure you're doing that correctly this time. There were some issues in your last pixel art. Some of you were getting the correct answer, but you were not typing it. You didn't follow directions, basically. You didn't type it in the correct format so that your pixel art would be completed. So we'll make sure we go over that with you guys. But other than that, we have tutoring every day of this week. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, we'll have tutoring here at 12:10 to 1:10. So you don't have to be there the whole hour. If you have a question, if you just have one question on one of your homework assignments, you can just come see us for that question. We can help you out. We won't give you the answers, but we will definitely try to find ways that work for you and that make this concept a little easier for you to understand. On Wednesday, we have tutoring from office hours from 12:30 to 2. And again, you can access your office hours in your Google Classroom where it says homeroom. Click on that. It should take you to what you're seeing now. And you want to click on the laptop. So other than that, today is Monday, which means all of your assignments from week 1 that you didn't turn in, or all of your assignments from week 2, yeah, that's what I wanted to say, from week 2 are due today. So for those of you that were wondering about progress reports and why were they red when it wasn't Monday yet, no excuses. Today is Monday. it means that they are due today. Your assignments are due today. And tomorrow, Doc is going to give you guys another progress report that will show anything that you're missing. So your grade up to tomorrow, okay? Which means if you didn't turn in your assignments, those will be read. And if they were worth the 40%, those will dramatically affect your grade. So you'll get progress reports tomorrow. There are parent conferences tomorrow from 4:30 to 6 p.m. We're working on getting that link for you, but look in the announcements in Google Classroom for that link tomorrow. And again, we'll let you know tomorrow either way where to look for it, but we're working on fixing some of those links. I think the principal know that the links were broken or not working.
Yeah, somehow things got messed up on the links. So yeah, I'll let you know when those are available.
But yes, parent conference is tomorrow from 4:30 to 6. One more important thing is that you're going to have your first quiz that is worth 40% of your grade on Thursday, April 1st. So not this week, but I can't believe it's going to be next week, right?
Yeah, it's next week.
Yeah, that's insane to me already. So next week on Thursday, you'll have your first quiz, and it's what we've been doing, working on slope. Remember, up and over, your rise over run from a graph. And it will also have today's concept of how to find slope when you don't have a graph. So we're doing another method. And perhaps one more topic of slope intercept form. So that is next week on Thursday, the day before you go on spring break. So spring break starts April 2nd, and we will be back at school on April 12th. So not this week. We still have school this week. We still have school next week, but we won't next week on Friday. That's your first day of spring break. So, so look forward to that. But at least you have a nice little quiz to say goodbye to us. And we'll try to get that graded as soon as possible. Other than that, there are 76 days left in this semester. Remember, the end of our semester or the last day of school is June 3rd. Keep in mind that this number here, 76, also includes your week off for spring break, your weekends, and Wednesdays. So your actual Zoom day with us are a lot less than that. So about 40 something days left. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started here. I am going to give you guys the link to your notebook. If you're looking for your notebook in Google Classroom, you wanna go to classwork, you now have a new week, week 3. All the way to the bottom of that week, you'll see week 3 notebook slope. I'm going to copy that link. I am dropping it in the chat for you guys now. So if you would prefer to click on that link through the chat, go ahead and click on that there. It's made available now. And it will take you directly to the week 3 notebook. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Again, very helpful if you're logging in. It saves all of your work and you don't have to do the work all over again. But a lot of you have started logging in, which is good. We know if you're logging in through Chrome or Google, because right next to your name on our end, it'll tell us if you have a basic account or if you have an actual account. So if we see the word basic next to your name, that's just because you don't, you're not logging in. And we see a lot of names coming up, repeated names. All right, so you should be joining us in Classkick. Click on that link to take you directly to your notes. So Emiliana, thank you for joining us on Classkick. Estrella, I see you there. Joseph, Luis, Melanie, both Melanies, Shailene. And I'll give some of you a couple more seconds to join us there. All right. I am going to go ahead and get started. A couple more of you are joining there. There we go. Okay, so this is our 4th day of taking notes. So this is day 4 of our slope section in our unit for linear equations. And for today, we're going to be determining slopes given a table or 2 points. So different from what we were doing last week, but you'll see how it's still similar. Just we have to use those different methods. Remember back in week 1, we talked about the different methods we have. No, that would have been week 2. Week 2, we talked about the different methods we have for finding slope. Yeah, I'm trying to think back.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Okay, good. So we talked about the different methods we have to use slope. We said how sometimes we have to use a formula. Sometimes we look at a graph and look for rise over run. So for today, we're going to be looking at examples when just simply counting a rise and a run, or counting how much we go up or down and how much we go over left or right, is not going to be helpful. So for today's objective, or after today's lesson, you should be able to say, I can determine the slope of a line given 2 points. So I'll go over to your Classkick side. For now, we're just going to go ahead and drag that objective over to the top of your line, of your page. And I love that a lot of you are already in the habit of just putting your objective up there. Some of you already had it up there before I even told you. Good job, you guys. We're training you well. All right. So how do we find the slope of a line when we only have 2 points? Well, we use the formula, and we talked about this formula last week. And it's going to be helpful in these cases because we can actually see or count how much we're rising, how much we're running. But instead of just giving you a formula, we really wanted you to understand where the formula comes from. It helps to make sense of that formula when you're using it. So we're really going to talk about how do we get that formula? Where does it even come from? Why is it still going to give me rise over run? So when you have 2 points, remember an ordered pair has an x coordinate and a y coordinate. But when we have 2 pairs, then we have 2 x coordinates and 2 y coordinates. And we want to label the points correctly. So for now, I'm going to pick this point here as my first. Give me a second. Here we go. So I'm going to pick this point here as my first ordered pair, as my first point. So when I label this point, I want to say x1 and y1. All this is saying is this is our first x from our first point, and this is our first y, or the y from our first point. Which means this point over here will be our second point. And that means we have the second x and the second y, the second x coordinate and the second y coordinate, because it is the second point. So x2 and y2. Did this one have to be our second point? No, we could have switched these. We could have said, well, I'll pick this one as my first point. I'll pick this one as my second point. That's totally fine. But notice if you have x1, y1 is the one that's paired up with that x1. So they're a pair. So if you go over to your Classkick notes, those points are already here. x1 is your first point, x2 is your second, x2, y2 is your second point. All right, but we'll come back to that. So how do we get that formula, the slope formula that we talked about the first day we took notes? Or, sorry, from week 2. Well, we know that when we have points on a graph, we're looking for a rise. We're basically trying to count how much do we go up and then how much do we go over to find our slope. Since we can't really count how many units we're going up and how many units we're going over, there is another way for us to do that. And for that, we have to look at what's going on here in our graph. So this would be where our y1 is, and this would be where our y2. So if we want to find the rise, meaning how many units we go up, we're basically just seeing how far away is this point here to this point over here on our rise, our vertical change. To find the distance between the first y and the second y, all we have to do is subtract the y's. So we get y2 minus y1, the second y subtracted by the first y. When we do this subtraction here, we're literally actually counting the space here, the distance or rise. So again, remember, we're finding slope, which is rise over run. We already know we can find the rise by subtracting the y's. And we can find the run by doing the same thing. But if you take a look at your run is basically the distance between your x's down here, your horizontal distance. So to find how far away this x is to this second x, you would just subtract your x's. So we would take x2, your second x, and subtract it by x1. On your Classkick side, we're going to go over here, drag a couple of pieces that we have, and draw some of these pieces, pieces here. So you can pick any colors, but in the presentation, we use blue here to show that our first y is here and our second y is here. If we want to find out the space, basically, how far apart are these two here, we would have to find the difference. And that comes from y2 minus y1. So the distance between our y's is just subtracting them. To find our run, to find our horizontal change, all we would have to do is find our x's here and find how far away this space in between them. How much is that space? What is the distance between those x's? Which means we can just go in here and subtract them. And that's where we get these subtractions between our x's and our y's for our slope formula. Again, we haven't really done much right here. We're just trying to understand the slope formula. So you want to draw your lines here, put these pieces in the correct spot. And again, if you're having any connection issues and you can't follow along with this, please let us know in the chat so we're aware of that. And then that also lets me know to let you take a screenshot at the end of this. Ooh. Melanie, your notes are looking perfect. She even did the little brackets. I didn't draw the brackets because I know there are students who struggle with drawing brackets.
I hate those.
Yeah?
I can't draw them. Like, not even with my, like, no. I can do the first one, but I can't do the backwards one.
Oh, let's see. Challenge accepted. Let me see. Oh, I can. Okay, here's the thing. When it's like I sound like I was such a bad student when I was in school, at least my elementary years. I always struggled in these braces or brackets too. And I was like, why can't I do it just like him, like my teachers or like her? And I would always force myself to do it right and like try to get close to having it nice. But nothing really clicked until I got to like middle school and high school. And I'm like, I'm so good at all these things. So proud of drawing a bracket correct. But again, don't worry. If you're not drawing it correctly, that's not really what we're looking at. We just want to see these lines here. You're trying to find the difference. All right, let's go back here to our table. So your table is essentially showing you the exact same thing. So here we saw that we had the first ordered pair and we had a second ordered pair. A table also shows you ordered pairs because we have an X on the first column and a Y on the second column, so they are paired up together. So when you have a table, your ordered pairs are still there. It's just that on the first row, we have our first X and our first Y. This is an ordered pair. On the second row, we have our second X and our second Y. Whenever you have a table yourself, you're actually going to have numbers in here, and we're going to look at an example in a little bit. But when you have the numbers in here, you want to make sure you keep them paired up. It's so important that you don't swap these things and say, well, I'll have this be my X1, and down over here, I'll have this be my first Y. A pair is the numbers next to each other. So if you decide that this will be your first X, the pair right next to it has to be that first Y. Now, also, not all of your tables are going to be short like this. You might have tables that are way longer than just 2 values. Most you will. That just means you have more points to pick from. So you'll have an X here that's paired up with a Y here. You'll have another X here that's paired up with another Y here. So when you have tables that are this long or longer, you actually have more options for your points. And that's a good thing because sometimes some of these numbers below here will be smaller than the numbers you have here. I don't know about you, but I prefer to subtract by smaller numbers than bigger numbers. So let's say I have a 0 here, and then I have a 1 here. I would much rather use a point that uses 0 and that uses 1 because it's so easy to subtract by 0 and it's so easy to subtract by 1. So you don't always have to pick the numbers on the top. You could pick the pairs on the bottom. So let me rephrase that. You don't have to pick the pairs on the top, but pick pairs on the bottom, whatever numbers are easier to work with, but you have to keep the pairs together. You can't say, I'll use this 0 and I'll use this Y. That is not a pair. A pair is the numbers right next to each other. Okay, let's go on over to your Classkick notes. Again, at this point, there aren't that many to drag. Hey, the Classkick ghost moved my X's. There is a Classkick ghost. I think we're coming down to, that's our scientific investigation there, that there's just a Classkick ghost that moves all these pieces and deletes them on your end.
Oh yeah, totally.
But over here, you're actually going to have to type because I didn't give you these extra pieces. We want to make sure you're practicing your typing as well so that when you actually have to type out a couple more things that you know how to do so. Oh, and I love that some of you guys are already color coding your X's and Y ones. You don't have to, but it helps because we color coded our rise and run in the previous lesson. So this will be X1. This will be Y1. Do you have to type it? No, you don't have to type it. You can even go in here with your pen mode and you can actually write it in here. It's up to you. You have the choice. But if you type it, this is what it would look like. Oh, not W, X2. You can even change the color of your text. Since my X's were green, I can still keep that concept going with the green here. And my Y's were red, I can still keep this red. Do you have to? No, that's fine if you don't have them color coded. Oh, and I like that some of you even put more X's and Y's down here. Okay, so now we really understand where we are getting some of these pieces where we have subtraction, why we have these Y's all over the place. And again, it's just because we're still calculating rise over run, but we don't have that visual where we can actually count the spaces between them. So instead of counting spaces between them, we can just subtract those numbers and we still find the rise and the run. So moving on over here, that's where we get our formula. Rise over run, or M, the slope, is equal to subtracting our Y's, our second Y minus our first Y, all over subtracting our X's. but we have to have our second x in the front subtracted by our first x in the back here. So carry those pieces over for your formula. Rise over run is still our slope, but we can find that by subtracting our y's at the top and subtracting our x's in the bottom there. Very good job, you guys. Your notes are looking fantastic. Everything's in the correct spot. Okay, so give me a thumbs up if you're good to move on. Give me a clap if you need more time. We're going to be moving into actually using your formula and calculating the slope with some examples. Only 2 examples. And then after we're done with these 2 examples, you will go try your turn on your own. Okay, I'll give you more time. And if at one point you start seeing how the formula works and you think this is easy, then you are more than welcome to move on to page 2 and work on your turn on your own. But if you would still like to work through the practice with us, then stick with us. But that's the cool thing about ClassKick and having these notes is that you have access to all of the pages and you can go ahead and work ahead of us if you're understanding these things already. But if you're not, that is totally fine. All right, if you gave me a clap, turn it into a thumbs up so I know you're ready to move on. Thank you. All right, so let's actually see how this formula works. So in example number 1, we have 2 points. 4, 3, our point in the front, and -2, -1, the second point in the back. It doesn't matter which one you pick for the first point or the second point, but I'm going to go ahead and pick 4, 3 as my first point. So you're going to want to label your points, and I'll start with 4, 3. I'm going to say 4 is my first x coordinate and 3 is my first y coordinate. So I labeled it as x1 and y1. These pieces won't be in your ClassKick notebook. We're going to have to write them in. So for the second point, I also want to label them, but as x2 and y2, my second x and my second y. Now that you've labeled your points, it's going to be a lot easier to use this formula of y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I always start by writing that formula down first so I don't forget where my pieces, where my numbers will go. So here's my formula, y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. This is going to help me decide where these numbers go. And before I put in my numbers, this is a very, very helpful trick. Before you put in any numbers into this formula, I want you to start off by drawing your bar. So writing out your bar here and including these 2 negative signs in the middle. This piece just comes from your formula. The negative symbol here, sorry, the subtraction symbol here and the subtraction symbol here, as well as your bar for your fraction. We're telling you this now because there's so many students that will forget that there's a negative in the middle when their number already has a negative. So this negative is a completely different negative than the negatives you have here in your numbers. Those are separate. This one is part of your formula. This one is part of your numbers. So always start by drawing your bar and putting your minus in the middle of both of these. So now that we did that, let's see how this actually works. How do we find the slope using the formula? Well, y2 should be the number in the front. If you look here, y2 we said is -1, the -1. So that -1 should be at the very front. y1, our first y, is in the very back. So y1 was 3, which means my 3 should be in the back. We'll do the same thing on the bottom. We should have x2. x2 we said is -2, so I will put my -2 in the front. And x1 should be in the back. This case, we have 4 as our x1, which means it should be written in the back. So labeling them and writing your formula is very helpful. All right, so now that we've substitute or plugged in our numbers into our formula, all you have to do is do the subtraction sentences on the top and the subtraction sentence on the bottom. So if you know your rules for negatives and positives, when do I add, when do I subtract, we're gonna have to use those here, but if you don't know those rules, you can easily plug these into the calculator, and the calculator will give you the answer, but you wanna make sure you plug in -1 minus 3, okay? But I'll give you a little review. If you have the same sign, this negative and this negative, you're supposed to add the numbers. So a -1 minus a 3, these are same signs. If I add them, I get 4. But because these were both negative, I should keep it negative. If those rules are too confusing for you, think of the real world. In the real world, whenever we see a negative number, especially in our bank accounts, that means you owe money. That's happened to me when I was very young. It's irresponsible. So learn healthy habits. Don't borrow money. But I'm going to borrow money from you guys. So this here, this -1 says, and again, see, bad habits. I don't grow out of them. I owe you $1. So think about that. I owe you $1. And then I go to you again and I say, hey, can I borrow $3? Why is it borrowing? Because negative symbols means you're borrowing and you're owing. So I owe you $1 and then I borrow $3 more. How much do I owe you now? Let me know in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, you can unmute yourself. Math is the only time your teachers are going to owe you money. I hope. Yes, good job, you guys. That is a -4. So if I borrowed $1 and if I owed you $1 and I borrowed $3 more, that means I now owe you $4. So that's why we write a -4. So negatives, it's all about owing and borrowing. Look at your subtraction sentence in the bottom, a -2 minus 4. I owe you $2 and then I borrow $4, which means I owe you $6. But if you know your rules for negatives and positives, you would have seen this as same signs. Then I just add the numbers 2 and 4, gives me a 6, but I keep their sign. Okay, from here, again, some more. Yes, good job. We will have to simplify. So when we see a negative divided by a negative, these turn positives, or whenever you see double negatives, that's addition or positive. Other than that, you still have to simplify. So when we have a fraction, I see that this is a number 4, a number 6. I'm thinking they're both even. Whenever I see even numbers, I can easily divide both of these by 2. Yes, we're still simplifying fractions no matter what, in your slope when we had graphs, or here where you have points. And again, one thing that my students always try when I tutor them is when I ask them to simplify a fraction, they'll be like, can I divide by 2? That's kind of like your go-to number to simplify. Can I divide by 2? Try it. Yeah, most of the time, dividing by 2 will be the way to simplify your fractions, but dividing by 2 doesn't always work. So if it doesn't work, make sure that there isn't another number we can divide by. So when we have this 4 divided by 2, that's just 2, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So our final slope is 2 over 3. Again, this is telling us we go up 2 and we run 3. So we found our slope, but we did it differently. We did it using a formula. So let's go on over to your Classkick side, and we can do everything we did, either text. If you want to use text or if you want to use the pen mode, you can do that. I'm going to show you an example of how we can do this using text. Our X, I labeled this as X1, and then I labeled this as Y1. If you still want to use your colors, you can use them. Do you have to? No. You can even just leave it as black font, black text, X1, X2, comma, Y2. But you want to label your points first. After you've labeled your points as X1 or Y1 and X2 and Y2, start off by writing your formula. You can write it or you can type it, it's up to you. Y2 minus Y1 all over X2 minus X1. If you want to color code these, you can do so. If you find that it helps, you can. If it doesn't, you don't have to. So again, label and write your formula. Before you plug in any numbers, do me a favor and write your bar and your subtraction in the middle. It's very important that you get in this habit here, because then you won't make mistakes when you're trying to find your final slope. Okay, let's just plug these things in like we did in our presentation. Y2 was -1, Y1 is 3, X2, this one here, is -2, and X1, this one here, is 4. I go ahead and work through these subtraction sentences. -1 minus 3 was -4. -2 minus 4 was -6. I should remember that a negative over a negative is positive, but I also should simplify these. And I get a +2 over 3 as my final slope. So again, don't worry too much about subtraction, those negatives and positives. If that is something that you just can't seem to remember, can't seem to understand, when do we add, when do we subtract, it's okay to use a calculator. We're not saying you can't. We don't want you to get stuck.
In fact, we're encouraging it.
Yeah.
Please use a calculator, even if it's 2 + 2. Sometimes we have bad days and we think it's 10.
Yeah. Yeah, we encourage it just because we don't want you to get stuck in this piece. We don't want you to get stuck here. What we're looking at, can you look at this and put in the correct numbers of -1 and 3? Can you do that correctly? Can you put in the correct numbers for X2, and can you put in the correct numbers for X1, and then do the subtraction to get to this piece here, the 2/3? That's what we really want. All right, so all of you are done with that, so I will move on to example number 2. So in example number 2, we have a table. Remember, a table still shows you points, so we want to start off by doing the exact same thing. You want to label your X coordinate and your Y coordinates, your first ordered pair and your second ordered pair. So when I see them here, I'm going to say, well, I'll choose the first X on top here as my first X, and then the bottom X as my second X. But when I do that, I need to make sure that this 10 over here, that's the pair of 8, is also the first Y, which means the second row will be my second Y. Did you have to do it this way? No, you could have switched it if you wanted to. It's up to you. But you need to keep it paired up. Okay, now that we've labeled, write down your formula. Y2 minus Y1 all over x2 minus x1. If we have that there, it's just a little guide so we can put these pieces in the correct spot. And before we start putting them in the correct spot, start by writing the bar, your fraction line, and your subtraction symbols on the top and on the bottom. If you get in this habit, you won't forget those subtractions and you will get the correct answer as long as you subtract correctly. After writing your bar and your subtraction symbols, you're ready to plug in to replace the numbers in the correct spot. So let's start by plugging in y2. Y2 we said is going to be 14. So 14 in the front. Y1, we picked 10. So the 10 has to be in the back. Do the same for your x's. X2, we said will be -7. -7 will be there. And x1, we said will be 8. So 8 should be in the back. And you now have your two subtraction sentences. And you want to follow your rules for your integers, negatives, and positives. The top subtraction sentence is pretty simple, regular subtraction. 14, take away 10. Oh, sorry, yes. How it goes positive in the dividing part. Sorry, I just saw your message, when you have a negative divided by a negative, we get a positive answer. So that just comes back to your rules of division and multiplication. If you have a negative divided by a negative, your answer should be positive. So same signs, it's positive. Different signs, it's negative. When you're simplifying a fraction, it's not that we're always going to divide by 2. We divide by the greatest common factor, but that's a lot of vocabulary there. You divide by, the one thing you want to do is, whatever it is that you're dividing by, you have to make sure the top and can be divided by that number. So for example, 3 over 6. 3, if I try to divide that by 2, it's not going to work. So in this case, you can't divide by 2. So you'll have to try to divide by something else. Yeah, so, good question. If you have a negative plus a positive number, okay, this would be different signs. Negative and positive, you would subtract your numbers, and your answer is not always going to be negative, and it's not always going to be positive. It's going to be whichever number was bigger. Let me give you an example. -6 plus 3. If you think about the real world, like owing money, I owe you $6 and I pay you back 3. I didn't pay you back everything, which means I still owe you $3. So notice my answer here was negative. That's because I had more negatives. I owed you more money than what I paid you. But if we had this the other way around, -3 plus 6, this would be a +3 because the 6 is now, the bigger number is now positive. You want to be careful with that. Again, if these rules are too much, since I'm getting a lot of questions with the negatives and positives, if these rules are too much, that's why we encourage a calculator too, so that you're not stuck in that part. I know students can get stuck here, and that prevents you from getting the final answer. And you know how to do it, you just got stuck in subtraction. And we want to avoid that, and you can use a calculator just to check. But I'll type in the rules on the top of your turn if that helps. Okay, so for here, all we have to do is 14 minus 10, which is 4. -7 minus 8, these are same signs, so add your numbers. 7 plus 8 is 15. but these were both negatives. You're still owing money, which means we're still in the negative. We didn't get out of that negative. So 4/15, we have a positive number divided by a negative number, which just means our answer is still negative. So remember we said when you have a negative in front of your fraction, either number could have been negative. The top could have been negative, but in this case, that negative came from our bottom number. So we still have a negative slope. This means we're going down 4 and over 15. All right, let's go on over to your table. Let's label your X's and your Y's. So we said this is X1, Y1, X2, Y2. Now that our X and Y's are labeled, I want to start off by writing my formula. Y2 minus Y1. See, that never changes, over X2 minus X1. Before I put any numbers, because I don't want to forget any symbols, always write your bar and your minus in the middle. When you're done with writing your bar and the minus symbol, you're ready to just plug in your numbers. Our second Y goes first. Our second Y was 14. Our first Y was 10. All over our second X, which we said was -7. And our first X was 8. If we do the subtraction here, 14 minus 10 is 4. All over -7 minus 8, which we said was -15. So for those of you that asked, do we always divide by 2? Let's try that here. If I divide by 2 here, if I divide by 2 here, 4 can be divided by 2, but 15 cannot be divided by 2. So in this case, no, we can't divide by 2. It's a helpful trick to try. But in this case, we could try dividing by 3. That also wouldn't work. Whatever number you try to divide by, it won't work because these two don't have anything in common when it comes to a factor. Lots of vocabulary there for our fractions. So this is what your notes would look like, fully completed. So if you want to get full points, you need to show us the work down here. There's some students that were just giving us the answer in the other periods. You're not going to get full points if you don't have the work that we're doing here. So give us the work, pieces in the correct spot. Go ahead and take a screenshot of that now. But you guys have great questions actually in the chat. So thanks for asking questions. Again, if you have this question, if you have a question, another student will most likely be asking themselves the exact same thing. They're just too shy to do it. So if you ask a question, other students are going to benefit from hearing the answer. So don't be afraid to ask questions. All right, give me a thumbs up if you're good to move on to the next page. Give me a clap if you need more time. Thank you, guys. Okay, I'll give you some more time. Just turn it into a thumbs up when you're ready. Thank you. I think it's interesting how some classes, the majority of students will type things out, and then in another period, other students will just write it out. It's so funny how they're all different.
It shows their individuality.
Yeah. So is it faith that you guys were all put in the same period together?
I know, right?
Right?
It's kind of weird how they are kind of grouped without even realizing
Mhm.
like they're have a lot of similarities.
It's just chance. All right. So if you have been waiting, we're basically done here with this first page. The next page is the your turn. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to move on to the next one here. So this is the your turn page, which means you get a chance to try these on your own. I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes to at least try 1 and 2 here. And then if we don't get to 3, you'll have to finish that one on your own. But if you happen to finish through all of these, make sure you're completing your reflection. And even if we don't complete it now, that you're doing your reflection on your own. To get full points for your notebook, you need to have all of these questions answered, and you need to have your reflection filled in. It's not very hard. Before, we used to have you guys just give us 2 sentences. And now all you have to give us is type in a couple of words, and that's it. It's even easier on you guys. I feel bad for the other students. I wonder if any of you are friends with them.
Yeah, Ms. Gomez was nice to you guys. She was like, we should probably do this to help them out. And I'm like, why would you be so nice? And she's like, well, I just want to help them out. And I'm like, you're just too nice. Like, you will soon learn to join the dark side. But for right now, she's too innocent.
For now, yeah. All right, so again, just type in a new math word that you learned today. I know it might have not been new for some of you since you've seen it either in 7th grade or 8th grade. Then don't think of it as a new math word you learned. Think of it as the word of the day. What words did you keep hearing over and over again during our lesson? Maybe look at your first page of notes. What words pop out here? Rise over run is still there. That word slope is still there. 2 points. Those are words that we're using. That's our vocabulary. So type in your pieces here for new strategies, the questions you might have. And I want to point out here in the your turn page, this box here is for your answer. So if you click on the select mode, it lets you select and actually type in your answer here. So whatever slope you get, give us that answer here. And it might be a fraction, which means you might do 3/5. I'm not saying this is the correct answer, but if it is, it's going to show you once you click out of that text box. If it turns red, that answer might be wrong. If it turns green, then that shows you, yes, you got it correct. Sometimes it's going to show you a red box, even though you know you are correct. And if you are correct, that might just mean that we're putting spaces and there shouldn't be spaces. So don't worry too much about that. But as long as you're using your formula correctly, that's good. So I'm going to start you guys off here. You want to make sure you label your points, x1, y1, x2, y2. After labeling your points, write your formula. Y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. And write your fraction, your bar here, with your subtraction. And what you're going to do is put the numbers in the correct spot. So calculate your slopes for 1 and 2. And if you happen to get to 3, that's perfect. But right now I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes. And then we'll come back and check how you guys are doing. If you have any questions, let us know in the chat. You can also unmute yourself if you want other people to hear the question as well, totally fine.
They can't unmute themselves.
Oh, that's true. I forgot. You guys are all punished. I'm just kidding.
Well, they can see, I think someone was trying to unmute themselves. Like I can see them trying and then it like fails.
Wait, no, I think we can.
Oh.
I wasn't trying. I was just like checking and I just unmuted myself.
Oh,
Like
then
muted.
that's only, then it's just for second period.
Oh, I see. So YouTube land has your voices out there. Don't forget
Well,
to
that's just because we had so many like issues.
yeah.
You guys are nice to me.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't like change that though.
Yeah. Oh. Luis, good job. You're doing great. Mariela, good job. Oh, if you see some writing pop up, that's most likely me or Doc Brown on there giving you some feedback. So don't be surprised. Oh my goodness, I love that a lot of you are still using your green and red even on this page. Do you have to? No, it just helps you remember to keep that mentality of rise, red, run, over, left or right.
Like it might seem dumb half of the things that we do, but like
Oh.
it's there's a reason why we do certain things. If you guys do the same thing, then you kind of like trick your mind into going, okay, red and green, red and green. So when you're doing this on like on your quiz or on your test, you might be doing it something and you're like, wait a second, is that a red or is that a green? And you'll remember, oh, red is on top, or whatever colors we're using. Like you'll connect that idea with what you guys are doing. So trust me, it is actually very beneficial to use colors.
Mm-hmm. All right, you guys have about 3 minutes. Most of you are all done with number 1, which is really good. So I'm just going to go in here and try to save us some time, and I'll fill in what a lot of you guys were showing. Y2 was -4. Y1 is 6. So see, I won't forget that negative in the middle if I just keep it there no matter what. X2 is 2, and X1 was 3. You guys are doing fantastic here with your subtraction. I said I was going to give this to you, but I forgot. Right here, I'm going to put in the rules for some of you that are not quite sure about your rules, but you still want to be able to do them. If you have the same sign, meaning if you have a positive with a positive or a negative with a negative, what you want to do with those numbers is add them. Add your numbers and keep their sign. If you have a different sign, what you want to do is subtract your numbers. So when I look at the first example, I see this is a negative, and I also have another negative here, which means these are the same sign, and I want to add my numbers. So 4 plus 6 is 10. And since they were both negatives, you're still in the negative. Now, when I look at the bottom subtraction here, the 2 does not have a negative, so that's a positive number. And then I see a minus in front of that 3, so that's a negative number. In this case, you have your different signs. So you're going to want to subtract your numbers. 3 minus 2 is 1. But you had more negatives, so you keep that negative sign there. When I say you had more negatives, it means the bigger number here was negative, which is why this stays negative. So now we just have a negative divided by a negative. Think about it again. Same signs means add. You can think about it as having same signs means positive. So that'll just be a 10. So your answer should have been 10 here. All right. So a lot of you did fantastic on question number 1. You guys were subtracting your numbers correctly, giving me 10. For number 2, you have x1 and y1 for 3 and 2, and then x2 and y2 for our second pair here. Start with your formula, y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. Anybody want to tell me what they got on top here for the numbers for y2 minus y1? What number goes in the front? What number goes in the back? Sorry, I'm answering one question. Give me 1 second. Hopefully that answers your question. I just saw it. Okay, here y2 is 2. So your 2 should be in the front. y1 is also 2. So that should be in the back here. x2 is -5. So I should write that in the front. And x1 is 3. So that should go in the back. So I got a couple of questions here with the zeros. I got 2 minus 2. That's just a 0. -5 minus 3. Remember, this has a negative. That has a negative. So both of these are negative. You're welcome. Which means we add our numbers. 5 plus 3 is 8. But because these are still in the negative, we keep it as negative. So I got a lot of questions here. It just wasn't, it wasn't just one person. I got 0 over 8. What does that mean if I have the 0 on top? Well, when you have this, you want to think about it as 0 divided by 8. Anytime we're dividing 0 by any number, it doesn't matter what it is we're dividing by, that answer is always 0. So in this case, our slope, we have a 0 slope. Now, you want to be careful with when you have a different type of situation. Sometimes you'll have your 0 on the bottom. If you have a calculator and you type in anything like 1 divided by 0 or 2 divided by 0, go ahead, Doc.
No, I was going to say, like, a funny way to remember this is on the top, it's the amount of cookies you have. The number on the bottom is the amount of friends you have. So if you have 0 cookies and 4 friends, how many cookies does each person get? Well, none. So, you have, a bunch of, upset friends. But if you have 4 cookies and no friends, then that's just a really sad, experience. But if you put that into Siri, or you ask Siri, what 0 divided by 0, it says something really funny.
Oh, does
So
it?
yeah, she makes a joke. But yeah, there's a funny Siri joke. But think of that way. Like, the number on the top is always the amount of cookies. The number on the bottom is the amount of people. How many cookies does each person get?
Okay.
So maybe that'll help.
Yeah, I like that. So 0 friends, that's a sad situation. So undefined slope. I'd rather have 0 cookies and some friends. Or
I like
actually,
cookies.
yeah. Now that I think about it, I'm like, would I want to give up cookies for my whole life for friends? I choose cookies.
I choose cookies.
Yeah,
That's probably why I don't have very many friends. I mean, you guys are my friends, right? Yeah. Friend hug.
Anybody out there?
Oh yeah. That it's really funny. If you guys have, or you just, like, if you don't have an iPhone, put it into Google and just say like, what would Siri say if you did that, and it should tell you guys like what the joke is.
Now I want to hear.
But she modified it. It used to be really mean and be like, you have no friends, And now it's a little bit different. It just says like, you know, your friends would be upset or something because they don't have any cookies or something like that, or your imaginary friends or something like that. I don't remember,
Oh,
but yeah, like they modified it to be more PC.
oh, I see. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna let you guys finish off number 3 on your own. Okay, it's a table, so you still want to make sure that you label your x's. If you want to have x1 and y1 on the top row and x2 and y2 on the bottom row, go ahead and do that. For the reflection, I got some questions asking if you have to write anything. Yes, no matter what, we want to see something in your reflections. It might have not been a new word you learned today, but it's the word of the day that we've been using. I don't know, we've been talking a lot about slope formula. Those were some words we kept using today. We still kept talking about rise over run. So that's another one. If you're absolutely stuck, we keep talking about slope, so just write slope 2. Give us something. There's words that you keep hearing going back and forth. So there is some words you can write on there. A new strategy. Today was all about a new strategy, a new method for slope. So you definitely have a new strategy. If you don't have any questions, then say, I don't have any questions. Don't just say none or no. Actually say, I don't have any questions. Or ask me how my day's going. No, I'm just kidding. Remember, we don't really have friends. We have cookies, but no friends. No. You can ask, want to be my friend? No. I'm just kidding. Give us a question there that might help you out. But other than that, that's it for your notes. I'm going to zoom out in case some of you missed that part here on the top or are having a hard time with your adding or subtracting. I have the rules up here for you guys. If you want to take a screenshot of that, and if it helps, go ahead and do that. But other than that, I'm going to review your homework really quickly for today so you know how to do it correctly. We don't want to have the same thing happening as your last pixel art. But even though we say it, some of you still tune us out.
They would never do that.
Well, because we're making friends. You don't ignore your friends, right?
Yeah, exactly, guys. They're so gonna ignore us this time, especially it's like, oh, they're
No,
too lame.
you're not my friend at all. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you're good to go on. Give me a clap if you still need more time on any of these. Okay, I'll give you more time. Thank you, guys. If you did give me a clap, make sure you turn it into a thumbs up when you're ready. But if you're waiting, you can go ahead and go to Google Classroom if you want to open up your homework just to get a good look of it, of what it looks like. It's homework number 6. It's another pixel art. Thank you. Okay, so for your homework, in Google Classroom, under classwork, it's right above your slope notebook. It's your Finding Slope pixel art. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that link for you guys. There it is. If you want to click on that link, it will take you directly to your homework, but I'm going to go ahead and open up here. So we have another pixel art, which means that anytime you type in your answers here and it's correct, this drawing here should start to fill in completely. And at the end, it should give you an overall image. But you can't get the overall image if you're not typing in your answers correctly. So I want to give you examples of how your answers should be typed in. So Doc was actually nice enough to give you answers here. So use these here as an examples of how your answers should be typed in. I want you to notice that the M, the letter we use for slope, Yeah, sorry. Oh, wrong week. Here we go. If you want a screenshot of the last page, I am going there right now.
Miss,
Mm-hmm.
do we do the 3rd and 4th page too or not?
Oh, no. The 3rd and 4th page is for Thursday. I mean, if you know how to complete it yourself, you're more than welcome to do it on your own.
Yeah.
If you don't know, then stick around for Thursday.
I bet.
Mm-hmm. Good question. Go ahead and take your screenshot if you needed that last page. All right. Okay, so for your homework, your pixel art, what I want you to notice is how is your answer typed out? There should always be an M. The M is used for slope. The slope equals whatever number it is that you get. So in this case, our slope is 1. You haven't seen equations, which is why Doc gave you the answers here for those. So you don't have to worry about these. These are already filled in, but use these as examples for how your answer should be typed. If I type this in wrong here, if I say M space equals space 8, notice the color difference. A red square or red numbers or letters is a wrong answer. If you have this nice and black, then that is a correct answer. So if you ever get a red here like that, it's wrong. Even if you don't put spaces and it's not the correct number, it's going to mark it as wrong. So 1, your slope should be correct and it should have the correct spacing. So no spaces in between the M and the equals. Okay, I want you guys to see this is exactly the same thing we've been working on today. There's tables, and at the way bottom down here, I went too far, there are points. So you're still finding slope using points. You're still finding slope using tables, but you're reviewing how to find slope from a graph as well. So these are all the different, how do you find the answers to the graph? You would have to count how many units you go up or down and how many units you go left or right. So if you're still struggling with something like this, a graph, then I would suggest you come and see us during office hours from 12:10 to 1:10. Last week was all about rise over run when we have a graph. So just remember, rising is either going up, or down. Oops, wrong one, sorry. I'm gonna put it in for everyone. Rise is up or down. So pick one point and another point. If you're going up or if you're going down to get to that point, count those units. Running is left or right. So it's just directions. How many units do you go up? How many units do you go over to get from 1? Very fast explanation. I know it might not be a very good one, but if you're missing out on that, come see us during office hours. We will be there today. We will try to help you out. You don't have to stay there the whole time. It could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, quick explanation if it helps, but come see us. But other than that, your exit ticket is already up. Don't forget to write your answers correctly in here. They should be black. If it's red, you did not follow directions and wrote your answers correctly or wrote the wrong answers. Sometimes, if you think, I'm sure I'm doing this right, what you want to do is maybe add a negative. You could have forgotten a negative for your negative fraction, or maybe flip your fraction, flip the numbers over in a fraction. You might have written rise on the bottom and run on top. That could have also happened. So change your numbers a little, but make sure your answers are turned black. That tells you it's correct. All right, other than that, your exit ticket is already up. Oh, 16 of you turned it in. Make sure you do